A massive thank you to today's video sponsor, which is Squarespace. If you need your own website, go to squarespace.com/Henry Turner.
Oh, it's windy, it's a little bit wet, and it's forecast to get wetter. We've got a few raindrops on the lens already. That's what we like. So can anyone explain this to me? I was only out a couple of days ago when I was in the Borrowdale Valley. I put a link to the video up in the corner there if you want to watch that. But I was moaning, I was complaining that there was no autumn colours. And now I'm here, quite close to home, only about 20 minutes drive just over the border into Cumbria. And look at it. It's you know, I wouldn't say we're in the midst of autumn, but it's much more autumnal here. Can anybody explain that to me? Alright, because we're talking two areas that are fairly close on the map as the crow flies. And it just looks completely different. Now anyway, in light of that previous video last week, a bit of a similar approach today. Hello car, nice and quiet. A bit of a similar approach in that I'm coming out with no real plan. I've picked a forest, a local forest, which is what I'm headed into now, that I've never been to before, don't really know. I got this photograph in that last video, and I really liked it, and I enjoyed shooting it, I enjoyed editing it, and it just gave me a little bit of a push to say, you know what, let's get into a little bit of woodland photography, especially because we're in autumn. So let's head on into the forest and see what we can find. I've come to a different woodland. So it was nice, the woodland that I was in earlier. Just a couple of problems. Firstly, it was quite messy, but you know that sort of dense messy when you get a load of saplings in between all the big trees and you can't even come off the path. But onto the second point, I couldn't even come off the paths if I wanted to because a lot of the woodland was actually private. So it was quite frustrating because I'd see a nice area of, you know, a nice patch of autumnal woodland and there'd be a gate there saying private, so I couldn't get to it, you know, unless I jumped over the fence, but not really mad for that sort of thing. So yeah, and above all, I think I was wandering around and just wasn't really feeling it. So I've come to somewhere familiar, which made me think, really, whenever I'm struggling, generally, just as a bit of a side note, as a tip, generally I do one of two things and they're both really contradictory. Either I do what I'm doing today and go somewhere that I know, somewhere familiar. This is my local woodland. I've been here so many times, and it's actually really nice to be here just as we're coming into autumn. But I know it, you know, I know compositions, I know parts of the woodland that are just worth avoiding because they're not photogenic at all. I know parts of the woodland that are beautiful and that I should invest the majority of my time into, you know, that sort of thing. So it's all familiar. Now the second thing I'd do is go somewhere completely unfamiliar if I'm struggling, you know. But it'd be somewhere that it'd be, let's say, generally or generically photogenic. So I'd spend a couple of days on the Isle of Skye, you know, not like I did there and went somewhere unfamiliar that I don't have a clue if it's going to be nice or not. Spend a couple of days in, yeah, like the Isle of Skye or North Wales or something, where you almost, this is where they sort of marry together the 2 points, you're almost guaranteeing you're going to get a good photograph, you know, either from familiarity or from a really photogenic location. So I hope that makes sense. But anyway, finally, after about 3 hours from leaving the gaff, even though I'm local, first shot of the day. Now it's a bit of a classic autumnal photograph really, with leaf on the floor, surrounded by darker leaves. We've got this nice yellow, what is it? It is like a maple leaf, isn't it? Is it a sycamore? I don't think we call them maple leaves here, but that is a maple leaf, isn't it? correct me if I'm wrong. What a wally. But anyway, the photograph, that's what I'm here for. Yeah, nice and classic, yellow leaf, and it's surrounded by all these dark leaves. And I like to think about my post-processing when I'm taking this sort of photograph. I have set the camera to take this as a square crop, or at least give me the preview of the square crop on the back of the camera, which I really like. It helps me with that visualization. But yeah, I'm thinking about the post-processing. I'll bring up the saturation or the vibrancy actually of the yellow leaf, and then bring down the vibrancy of everything that surrounds it, and really bring attention to it. On top of that, I'll add a vignette, you know, to all the corners of the square to bring the eye into that leaf. It's the kind of photograph that I can imagine printing out and having up in a frame at home, you know, somewhere quite neutral. And I don't know why. I think it's the sort of thing that everyone can relate with, can't they? This is the sort of photograph that anyone would take on a woodland walk, taking the dog out, and they'd get the phone out and they'd say, oh, look at that leaf. And, you know, somebody might not even be into photography, but they know that it looks nice. So I hope all that makes sense. So, the technicalities, I've got a polarizer on the front, 24 to 200. I'm in at, yeah, about 130 mil, something like that. There's actually, because it's really wet and it has been raining, there's actually quite a lot of glare or sheen on the top of this leaf. So the polarizer is actually helping to cut that off, which is fantastic, even though I haven't really got much light. It's a really long shutter speed, I think. Yeah, 5 seconds at f8 and ISO 64. It's because it's a gloomy day and we're in a woodland. So, I'll grab that now. And I've obviously just focused on that yellow leaf. And first shot of the day, get in! So, are we in focus? We are. Hope you like that photograph, but I think it's going to have been alright. But here's the thing, when you leave your house, no matter what sort of location you go into, you've always got an idea of the type of photograph that you want. And I'm determined, I want a woodland photograph with trees in it. I'm desperate, especially that we're coming into autumn. So I'm going to keep going, and fingers crossed, I'm going to find one. I will do. Now, before I move on, I quickly wanted to say another massive thank you to today's video sponsor, which is, of course, Squarespace. I wanted to go down a little bit of a different route with today's explanation of Squarespace. Usually I just tell you who they are, why you should use them if you want to build your own website, and why I really like them, which is all true. But I actually wanted to say a massive thank you to you guys, to be honest, because I've had a lot of positive feedback just from random people emailing me, or even in the YouTube comments, saying that you've used Squarespace yourself, you've built your own website for your photography for the most part, of course, because this is a photography community, a photography channel. But I find that really reassuring, so that's fantastic. I love to hear all of that sort of, all those stories, you know, how you've built your own website. I did build my own website with Squarespace nearly 3 years ago now, and I'm so glad that I used that service. I really am. Very, very easy to do it. Basically, if you don't know what it is, Squarespace is a website. You go on it on your web browser and you build your website on there. But it sounds proper complicated when you say build your own website. But honestly, it's proper easy. You get templates, which make it easier to begin with, and then you can customize all of these templates. I'll be showing you my website up on the screen now. And you can customize it to make it how you want it. So it's very unlikely with Squarespace that you're not going to be able to get your website exactly how you want it. I use mine for e-commerce. I always say that because I think a lot of you guys will want to do the same and sell your prints on there. So highly recommended from me. Thanks again for all the positive feedback. If you want to give Squarespace a go to squarespace.com/Henry Turner. And use the offer code Henry Turner for 10% off your first purchase. And it does help me out as well. I don't usually say that, but it's like a sort of affiliate link. So if you're gonna sign up, use that link. There's your dinner. Right, let's go and try and get this woodland photograph. So, now we are talking. Now we are talking. We're in the woods and we're photographing some trees. Get in there. I wasn't asking for the world. I think, obviously I mentioned before that this woodland's quite familiar to me. Now I know that this section that I'm in now is quite photogenic, that's why I've come to it, but I think this is an area or a collection of trees that have caught my eye before in the past, but I know I've definitely never taken a photograph here. So there's 5 trees altogether within this composition at least, and I've tried to photograph it in 2 or 3 different ways. Firstly, I've done a pano with the camera in a portrait orientation and about 6 shots from left to right, and yeah, I was in at 170mm, and I've put it in a landscape orientation now, and I feel like there's probably no point in doing a panel. I've used the settings on the Nikon Z7 again to show me a 16:9 crop, which is almost that sort of like letterbox. It's actually what video is. It's what you're looking at right now. So you know, it's not your standard, it's a little bit more cropped in on the top and the bottom. I actually really like that crop for the woodland, you know, because it brings you up and away from the woodland floor, and it brings you down from the canopy of the woodland where you might have like bits of the sky in. I think, have I got some in? Yeah, I've got a few little bits of the sky in, but it can't be helped. I don't find it that distracting. Now, here's where I feel like I'm being a little bit creative here. Initially, I don't know if you can tell, but it's quite windy. It's actually gusty, so it's not windy right now because I've just said it's windy. But there we go, can you hear it? Bit of a gust. So the leaves are blowing all over the shot. So naturally I thought, right, quicker shutter speed, opened up the aperture to f6.3, increased the ISO to 640, and I took the shot, and the leaves were nice and sharp. And then I thought, you know what? Let's try and be a little bit creative and capture the movement in those leaves as they're blowing around. So I put it down to ISO 64, and I shot it at half a second. Still at f6.3, by the way. And I actually think I quite like it, because of course the trunks aren't moving, so they're pin sharp, but then the leaves are all sort of blurry around all the trunks, and because there's 5 separate trees, I don't know, I think it looks really cool. So here I'm zoomed in about 100mm it seems. See how windy it is now? Zoomed in about 100mm, but I'm still capturing quite a lot in the frame. So my point is, there's like an explosion, a splash of all different colours, especially because the time of year we are, or how far we are into autumn. There's still loads of greens, but we're getting quite a lot of yellows and oranges as well. So when we're getting the movement in those leaves, it's kind of blurring, you know, all of those colours together. But I don't know, a little bit experimental. When I'm not really feeling massively inspired like I am today, I like to just, you know, mess about a little bit and try and get creative. But I hope, it's definitely more hope than expectation, that this is probably going to be half decent. I'm really glad that worked out. Not to say that any of the photographs that I've got are any good, but I was just having a little bit of a period whilst I was out and about where I was just thinking, not really feeling it today, but that brought back a little bit of inspiration. By the way, if you ever do have days like that, where you're not really feeling inspired, you know, there's no passion, the fire's not burning, whatever, don't worry about it. It happens to me, it happens to everybody all the time. The only problem is, in the world of social media and Instagram and YouTube, you just don't see that often, you know. People ain't gonna post up rubbish days. I'm not gonna post up a video of like my incredibly horrendous day out with my camera, didn't take one photograph, the weather was rubbish, went home miserable. It's just the world that we live in, you know. So don't feel down on yourself if you do have those days. Understand that, especially in the creative world, it's very, very normal. Don't beat yourself up, all right? Remember that. Right, I'm going home for a cup of tea. I haven't said that in a while, have I? I've not been having any less cup of teas, but thank yous very much, as always, for tuning in. I appreciate your support massively, and I shall see yous on the next adventure. Out!